Hello everyone and welcome to Tales from the Bridge. In this episode, Marty, Sam, and Kevin sit down to discuss Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. They also tell us about a few other books they're currently reading and of course, end off with some trivia. As usual, we hope you enjoy this episode. Alright, let's make our way over to the bridge.
Science fiction, science fact, and this week we're going to do science fiction science with Marty.
So it's science fiction, science. So future science, right? Science that could come from science fiction, stuff we can imagine happening in the future. So today I'm going to try to tell you about how to control the weak force, the weak nuclear force, to your advantage to be able to undertake the transmutation of all elements into any element you want, and therefore control solid state physics and atomic physics at whim in the future.
With the help from some bozo named Higgs.
Okay, well, it turns out that the Higgs boson thing is something that has just been proven for real. So
it's not some guy.
It's not some guy. There was a guy named Higgs, but the more interesting part of it is for me to explain to you what a boson is.
Not a bozo.
I feel like it's not like some sort of cryptocurrency or something new.
This is like fundamental deep physics. Okay, so listen, there are bosons and fermions in the world. Fermions are the mass-bearing particles, nominally. We'll get back to that. That means like it's the electrons and the protons and the neutrons of the world. Okay, those are fermions. They're matter. Okay, bosons are the force-carrying particles. So when you talk about electromagnetism, a photon is the boson, the force-carrying particle of the electromagnetic force, right? When like a positive charge and a negative charge piece of matter interact, it's because there's a photon that like boom goes between them, and that's the boson of the electromagnetic force. Okay, so it turns out the boson for the weak force, right, the one that's responsible for the radioactive decay of nuclei, there's one for that, but it has mass, so it only acts over like a really short distance, but it controls the ability to turn a top quark into a down quark.
Is that what makes it God? Like, is he God? Is this
boson
guy God?
Sorry, I got off the Higgs boson. So there's a different boson, and this boson has mass. Okay, so what the Higgs boson does is it imparts mass to other particles. Okay, it's this field that things move through, right? The Higgs field, right? And particles that move through it suddenly gain mass. So protons, boom, they have the mass of a proton. An electron moves through this field, boom, it imparts it with the mass of an electron. But it turns out there are also force-mediating particles that somehow get mass from the Higgs field. So anyway, that might be kind of sophisticated, but W plus and minus bosons and Z bosons that are the force-carrying particles of the weak force, instead of the electromagnetic force, they have mass. And so that's why they only act inside atoms, and they don't make their presence known in like the rest of the physics of the universe, and nobody ever thinks about them. Okay, so really the reason I wanted to tell you about this even before we started, okay, so here is a major fact. People tell you, physics people, the government, I'm talking like when you try to research, the weak force and like bizarre nuclear physics things, they say neutrinos. God knows, man, they don't interact with anything. Neutrinos don't have anything to do with anything that's going on in all the chemistry and nuclear chemistry and radioactive and everything applied form of physics. Nobody can do anything with a neutrino, and it's not true. They've been lying to you all along. It turns out that when an atomic nuclei like uranium or thorium, something radioactive, when it undergoes radioactive decay, is because it's actually absorbed a neutron, taken the W boson out of it, and turned it into an electron. And this is the beta, like something really prosaic and boring about nuclear physics. There's an electron that comes out when a nucleus undergoes radioactive decay. And it turns out it does that because it absorbed a neutrino. Sorry, like neutrino, like Star Trek neutrino. Nobody on like science land ever talks about neutrinos being responsible for anything, but like we see neutrinos in Star Trek all the time, like neutrino physics and but it's actually really relevant. So that's what I learned.
Oh,
And then what does that mean? So what's the relevance of that?
yeah.
The relevance is we are the reason like a carbon-14 nucleus in your body decays down. This might not be precisely true, but at least pretty close to like a carbon-12. Like, you know how you have like radioactive carbon in you all the time because that's generated in the upper atmosphere, and living beings constantly like take up that freshly generated carbon-14. It's a radioactive form of carbon that you're made of. And so when you die and you start to decompose, and when fossils die and dinosaurs die, right, like we can tell how old they are because of the radioactive decay of carbon-14 in there that hasn't been renewed anymore by living processes, right, to go down to carbon-12. So what I'm telling you that I just learned, and I think is pretty amazing, is the reason the carbon-14 decays to the carbon-12 from a radioactive form of carbon to is because it absorbs neutrinos from the sun. And those neutrinos create W bosons that also violate lots of cool laws of physics, of symmetry. And it's ultimately responsible for, like, you know, the I don't know, nuclear physics of the universe.
Does that mean we're going to have nuclear fusion?
Yeah. So understanding this kind of thing is exactly how to do nuclear fusion. It turns out there's some nucleuses, right? Like the protons and neutrons. Forget about all the electrons outside, right? The nucleus is, if they're smaller than iron, they generally like to get together with other ones, and like they're more stable when they go glunk. Like a hydrogen and a helium like to get together, and a lithium and a beryllium and all these carbon, even all of living elements. Like they're these nuclei that like ultimately when you could glom them together, and they would be happier together. But after iron, all the uraniums and plutoniums of the world, those are too big. They want to fall apart. And the reason that is because there's all these protons that are positively charged. And by the electromagnetic force, they're being crammed together against their will. And the electromagnetic force is pushing away all these positive charges mediated by a bunch of neutrons in between. And that becomes bigger once you're bigger than a certain size. And when you're smaller than a certain size, the nucleons themselves exert like a better attractive force among each other to overcome that repulsive force. The weak force is stronger than the electromagnetic force, and that's why, you know, nuclei form and are stable in the first place.
So does that mean teleportation and warp drive?
Oh, I see what you're saying here. So imagine that you could simply have a beam of W bosons, which govern the weak force, in the same way that we currently have light as a beam of photons, which govern the electromagnetic force. Okay, if you could make a beam of that W boson, you could hit the down quark inside a neutron of one of the nucleons inside that nucleus, and you would flip the down quark to an up quark. Okay, which there's a trio of quarks inside each proton and neutron that determines whether it's a proton or neutron. And it would change the neutron into a proton. So it is the alchemical transformation by one proton up, right? You can change any element to the element above it by shooting a W boson at the atom.
So we need a W boson gun. Is that right?
Well, I have no idea what that could even be. But in this, yeah, we have to make a W boson gun. If you could make a W boson gun and control it, you could transmute any element into any other elements with just like pulses. You'd be like, oh, you're carbon right now. Boop, 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 boop. Now you're oxygen. Boop, boop. Now you're, something else. Silicon, right? Like it's perfect precision engineering of like how to turn nuclei into other nuclei.
Marty,
if you just control that.
A perfect storyline for a sci-fi story, the W boson gun for matter transference.
The W boson gun. It has a certain je ne sais quoi about it, don't you think, as a title for a short story?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking me there. That was fun. Okay, great.
I'm reading, I just finished reading Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I loved it. And our listeners might remember that we reviewed Shards of Earth a few episodes back. And while we're reading that, I remember all of you were like, oh, you got to read Children of Time. I got to read Children of Time. Spiders. And so I was like, I finished the book that we're going to review in this episode early, and so I had some time. So, you know what? It's time for some extracurricular reading, and so I downloaded Children of Time, and I loved it. I couldn't believe the scope of it. I think that's what really grabs me is that this is such a far-reaching. It's spans thousands of years, but you kind of feel like you're with the same characters or generations. Like, it's generational, but you kind of along a family line, so you kind of follow the same versions of the characters through time, and it's incredible. Yeah, this idea of populating a new world, but seeding it for evolutionary purposes, and then things go awry, and what comes, what evolves, and what, anyways, yes, it just, and the ending too. I think, Marty, I kept thinking about this because, and it made me not worry about the ending, because you were like, oh, how's he going to wrap this up? Like, it doesn't feel like it's just going to come to a disastrous conclusion. And then you're like, oh, right, that makes sense. I see here, and how it is very clever. And it just, so I gotta now.
I hope I didn't ruin that for you, because I was literally agog. Like, I did not know. I guess I had already reassured you that everything would work out fine. So I might have colored your experience.
No, I kind of needed that, because there are parts of it where it comes close to jumping the shark for me, right? Like, where I was like, there are a couple elements of the book where I was like, oh, okay, this is we're going down a rabbit hole here, it was good. I actually kind of needed that reassurance to get through those bits where I was like, I'm just bringing, not, this isn't a spoiler, but at some point a cult arises on a generational ship, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this, where this is going. And then I circled, and I realized they need to have this other sort of epic. There's many epics happening at the same time. And I'm trying not to give too much away.
I know it's so hard to talk about books, especially their endings.
It's so good.
Decided not to be spoilers, and in some sense, it'd be awesome to just talk about what happens at the end. Like, oh my god, that was so great! I want to talk about that. Right? It's an amazing resolution that I didn't see coming at all.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw it coming at all, but like, I was like, oh, wow.
Kind of. There's clues sort of dropped throughout, and if you have any sense of Roman history, you get that, where you kind of adopt the conquered in a way, and I think, and I don't think it gives anything away if, in discussing it, like how things go wrong. Like you seed a planet, you expect one species to arise, and that doesn't happen, and another species arises, and so, anyways, there's two other books in this series. What is it?
Children of Ruin is the sequel, and it's about encephalopods. So insofar as Children of Time is all about spiders, Children of Ruin is all about octopi. And he does a great job. Octopuses, yeah. And there are officially different ways to say it correctly. Not a settled issue.
All right.
and the third one, which hasn't come out, I think, yet, but we did hear from him, is coming soon and is written and done, is about corvid intelligence, the intelligence of crows, who are said to be, literally, there are birds here who have like human level consciousness of being like self-determined beings and making decisions and like all that stuff. Corvids, which I think is amazing. I can't wait to read it. Like, as much as I love the octopi after the spiders, I'm really looking forward to the crows.
And that's going to be called, and that's or is it Children of Memory?
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that. It's great. Wow, Children of Memory.
And it's supposed to be out in 2022.
Cool.
All right.
Well, it sounds like we've all needed kind of lighter reads, because after I had read Parable of the Sower, I also went lighter. I actually went in two different directions that were both lighter. First, I went in the direction of Peter F. Hamilton.
Nice.
Back to his Dreaming Void series in the Commonwealth universe, and I read one of the later ones in that series called The Abyss Beyond Dreams, which is just it's more the same. But what it was for people who have read a lot of those Commonwealth series, it was almost like a retrospective. There was a whole new plot. He managed to get in with the help of the Rael, Nigel Sheldon, of course, the ultimate protagonist, the in essence the most powerful man in the universe, the richest man in the universe, who always has weird adventures, manages to get into the dreaming void with the help of the Rael, which is a very powerful race of aliens, and he goes on to, basically save humanity inside of the dreaming void, or work his way towards making that happen. None of it's super believable, but this whole series isn't meant to be.
It's like super far distant future,
super far distant, and his world is kind of a utopian viewpoint of where human civilization could go with the use of technology, and it's a great view on where people could go with technology, and it's fun. I really like it. But this was really for people who have already read a lot of the books, because I would say every chapter there's 2 or 3 references to characters from the other books in the series, and it's certainly not one I'd recommend for folks who haven't read the other ones, because so many of the references would just come out of nowhere and would be meaningless to you, and you don't already have the buildup of who these characters are. So if you've read any of the other ones before, this is a great book. Otherwise, not one of my recommendations. But I did also get into some of the Expanse books. I read Abaddon's Gate, and the next one in the series after that one. Both of them. I got through both of them, and they were so much fun. I love those books.
Oh, yeah, I love that series. I love the books and the show. It's fantastic.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. You've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune into 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Yeah, I haven't watched any of them yet. I've been trying to get through the books. Sibylla Burns, that's the second one. I read the third one. I read, I guess it's the fourth, is it?
Fourth, yeah. Abaddon's Gate's third.
Yeah, I read that, and then Sibylla Burns. Burn. That was my...
Oh, okay.
I still got more to go through.
I have the latest book in hardcover too.
Oh.
So you don't have to buy it. You can just borrow it from me.
Okay. All right.
Can I maybe say that I have been finally relieved to read a book I love again? It's literary. It's wonderful. It makes me feel like I'm not reading science fiction. It just happens to have science fiction elements that expand the story. It's called The Sparrow. It's by Maria Dora Russell. Written a while ago, 2000, maybe even 90s. And it's I think I found it on lists of science fiction I might like for being philosophical and religious themes and stuff. It certainly reminds me of A Canticle for Leibowitz, right? It's the story of Jesuit priests in space, sort of. It's just like, it's a book that you just feel like, oh, I'm not even reading science fiction. You guys ever read? I don't know why it reminds me of this, but Captain Corelli's Mandolin. It's just like a regular old, good old literary quality story about people and in some place and time, and it feels like you're reading that happens to be about Jesuit priests and other people and the belief in God and science and all this, and it's just the story of first contact. It turns out a Jesuit priest's friend basically gets the first signal from space, decodes it at Arecibo. The Catholic Church has enough resources and wherewithal to be like, yep, we're sending people now. And the world's governments did there for a while, so they're 5 years behind. But basically the Jesuits and, the first mission to Alpha Centauri, the closest possible place where they picked up transmission of literally music being sung by sentient beings on one of the planets there in that system. And I love it. And
it is a really interesting idea that it would be a sect of Catholicism that would be the first into Alpha Centauri to see these folks, and
Totally.
fascinating.
They've already kind of like, it makes clear right up front, like, listen, the Catholic Church had this conversation already a long time ago. All this is done. The policies are ready to go. If it's ever discovered that God has more children than it is, us as a sibling race of sentient beings created by God, it's on us to go and meet them. Like, nobody disputes that from Catholicism's point of view. And I think, I don't know, maybe Catholicism's just got a shit together in a sense that they've already had formally all that discussion. And I'm sure other sects would be fine with it too, or maybe they wouldn't be as fine with it. I'm not sure.
Well, the Jesuits would.
Religious response. That's the point, right? They have the resources and they have the response time. They could like choose to go tomorrow. Like, yep, got the signal. Got a bunch of Jesuit priests lined up right now. We're sending Jesuits to Alpha Centauri.
Well, they'd be the ones. I guess they're a pretty progressive group amongst the Catholics, right? The Jesuits. They're always doing interesting things.
I think so. Well, they're the most secular of the Catholics, I would say, too. Right? What they believe in is education and knowledge and discipline, and you're allowed to have doubts, and these aren't the people that are having mystic experiences of like the objective existence of God. They're like, you know what? I'm dedicating my life to a cause under this general frame. I don't know. I think the Jesuits have done a lot of good, probably a lot of evil too, and
what was that book called again?
The Sparrow, also followed by Children of God. Really nail the point home. And now I have to say, listen, it's not really about like, people that believe in God going to space. There's a lot of that, some of that, but there's also like the classic, today, just yesterday, I read that like what I was craving for from this book is the medical doctor who loses a patient once they've arrived at the new planet, that says, here you people have been saying all along that the reason everything's been going great is because God did it. And the moment somebody dies, it's my fault. I don't know what went wrong, and it's not God's fault when somebody dies. Yeah, it's God's fault when somebody dies, if you're going to claim that as God's, beneficence for when things go right. It's sort of like, I like that I'm not I don't know what I think about God. Finally, but I love that she like gets right into it, right? It's not about infallibility, like, and this is really actually, so I should have my facts straight, but it is actually her story based on this Jesuit, there's only one Jesuit priest who survives the mission and returns with his hands maimed, cut off, every fingertip at the knuckles, and flayed. And it turns out this is actually a sci-fi version of a story, and she refers to it directly, of a real thing that happened to a Jesuit priest who went to live with, I believe, Mohawks in North America in like 18th century, I hope. And he, got sent home with his hands maimed. And so this is a transcription into science fiction of like this, like historically true thing. Anyway, I'm not done. So I'll let you know how I feel about it when it's done, when I've finished it. But it might be one of our upcoming books. I am like happy to turn the pages. I feel like, God, I'm just like, it's like being in the hands of a master, right? It's literature, it's not sci-fi, and it feels that way. You're like, I'm reading about characters that I care about and being constructed in a beautiful and interesting way. So that's what I always look for from sci-fi, and I haven't found one in a while. So I'm pretty excited about this one.
Interesting.
Nice.
Well, Sue Burke, when we interviewed her, one of her closing discussion related to literature and science fiction and the intersection between those two things and whether they can be reconcilable or irreconcilable. And so I guess you're looking for that intersection of the great literature.
It's also interesting, Maria Russell. Russell's style is reminiscent also of Sue Burke, right? Like it's this neat, like it does remind me of interference and of semiosis, this book too. So that might be why I bring it back to you guys to read it.
Cool.
So I recommended The Parable of the Sower last month as my choice. It's by Octavia B. Butler. who is a celebrated black woman who brought her talents to sci-fi in the 70s and 80s, I think, and 90s. So Parable of the Sower is mid 90s, I think, right? Is that true?
93, yeah.
93, yeah. I thought it was incredibly well written. I also thought I could see the influence of Octavia Butler on the books I've read by N.K. Jemisin, Nora Jemisin, and also by Nalo Hopkinson, our Canadian sort of female author from also the 2000s. There's a lot of, I think, literary history that was started in Octavia Butler's work, and Parable of the Sower is a worthy work to listen to and to think your way through and see what she was trying to tell us.
I got through it quick. I found it a page turner. I mean, this is a dystopian book, and it's kind of the dystopian's dystopia of near term Earth. It wasn't super far into the future, and you got to kind of think about the history of when this was written. It was published in 1993. She probably wrote it through 91, 92. And this is the time of, if anybody remembers, in Southern California, the Los Angeles riots that came out of Rodney King beating and court proceedings that the police, were let off from those charges. So Octavia Butler would have seen this world going to hell in her world, right? Because she I think she's from California, or was living there at that time, if I'm not mistaken. And so I can imagine that she could see California just in an absolute turmoil. So the scenes where they're on the road and they have to look out for themselves, and everybody's just trying to steal and kill to scrape by and survive. You could almost see that being a plausible future at that time. You can almost see that as a plausible future today too, really. But at that time, I could very much see it. And so this perspective of how race was so important in the survival, and it was so crucial to the storyline. It really tells a great story about how a Black woman can survive in that type of situation, and how she can be strong, and not only that, lead others. Right? I loved how. And where this earth seed philosophy and religion comes from is not clear to me. It seems it's kind of dropped into the storyline out of nowhere, but I loved it. I absolutely loved the earth seed philosophy, and we can talk more about that later. But because I'd love to get your guys' thoughts on that.
That was a part that I did like quite a lot about. So Earthseed was basically like a form of Christianity married with Buddhism, right? That Buddhism claims that the fundamental thing about reality is change. And so I think what she did in Earthseed is just say, like, let's call God change. And if God is change, so it's like a monotheistic, I don't know, agglomeration onto a Buddhist sort of belief about change being the source of everything. Like, God is change. And I like that. I like the philosophical speculation it did. I think, I enjoyed it as a story of a young woman who was inspired with a new sort of way to move religion forward. But it was ultimately overwhelmed. I mean, there were dogs that ate babies. It's really hard to get past that. It's the road-ish, like, kind of post-apocalyptic, like, truly dark tale. And the tale is of the poor and desperate preying on the slightly less poor and desperate, right? And this is like I'm happy to read that. I'm happy to get everything I can out of the learning from that, but it is pretty dark. And I gotta say, listen, I've read Nora Jemisin, I've read Nalo Hopkinson. Like, I'm interested and I'm curious about reading Black authors. I've read lots, and I'm trying my best, and I want to think about race in a pretty sophisticated way from their lips. I was a little surprised with this book, maybe I'm going out on a limb here, that I didn't see much race programmed into it. It was really about community. Communities had Black people, Latino people, white people, right? There wasn't a whole lot of racial commentary, frankly, inside the communities that she describes. It was the real stratification of society is poverty, as it always has been, whether it's white, black, brown, yellow, whatever. And so, in some sense, I kind of appreciate that. I was like, oh, I thought I was going to get like a whole bunch more like race relations stuff, but I didn't have a particular sense of who was white, black, Latino in the groups. I mean, you sort of knew along the way, but it didn't seem to matter as much as you would think. All that mattered was like, there were poor, desperate people and more poor, desperate people.
Well, I thought, I agree. Like, it was this sort of apocalyptic road trip that, like you say, was sort of similar to The Road in many ways.
Yeah.
But there's this mystical element that takes this story, and I think in a different direction, that enables this examination of religious evolution and and really sort of showing capitalism for the sort of predatory system that it is. And I think the book does a great job of showing that real change requires crisis, that real challenge to, say, religious tradition requires you actually being on the precipice. And if people are forced to change and evolve, then they will actually do so. But if they're not, they don't have to, then the koala will keep on chilling out, so I think it's for me that it went further than The Road did, where like your standard kind of post-apocalyptic, like The Walking Dead, the people are the worse than the zombies in these sort of stories, and you get that here as well. But what I thought the real accomplishment of this work was it kind of lays bears to what, like, how capitalism creates a sort of indebtor society, right, where people are essentially slaves, and it becomes and it harkens back to the Underground Railroad and how reading and evolution or education were brought into escapees to the North. They would learn how to read through the Bible, and so it became a kind of education system, an evolutionary system in terms of a rebellion. And I say evolutionary in terms of changing one system to another, and you do that through education, and you do that through being forced to learn and adopt a new way of living. And that's where this religion, I think, of Earthseed is going, right? We churn, God is a trickster figure and is in fact an embodiment of change. And so this enables them to throw down their shackles and go in a different direction. And ultimately, our sort of protagonist is creating this religion. Her ideal is that perhaps that can't happen on Earth. Maybe it has to go into the futures in the stars, right? And so there are these big leaps of you kind of forces you to change, and you're kind of ready for that change because the whole world is literally burning around them, right? Their world is no longer safe. They've got there really is no safe harbor, and so you have to think big. You have to think about what comes next. And I think there's a lot that I'm missing here, and I'm doing a poor job, I think, of interpreting maybe the original intent of the work, but that's sort of what my takeaways from it were. It was really well done. I thought it was really interesting, really dark. I kind of a sucker for a post-apocalyptic book, though. I kind of, this idea that you can't even make your home safe. You have to like pack up and go and learn to think in a drastically different manner. And I think if you look at the African American experience, that had to happen to them, right? Like, in order to free themselves of slavery, they had to get over the idea of going back to the fields. They had to make a huge decision to risk life and limb to escape and leave. And in a sense, their world was then burning down, right? Like, and in the context in which this was written, where he rides in East LA, where it must have felt like the system was burning down, and there was, change had to come from that.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting point about the evolution of it that you mentioned there, Sam, because the evolution of religion, what better religion could evolve to that type of context than embracing change, right? Like life in that situation can be nothing but change. So how do we adapt to it? Well, let's make it a deity, right? Let's I don't know if they worship it. Yeah, I guess let's worship change. Yeah, it's an excellent.
Well, they're also, it's not even that they're worshiping change. I mean, that seems facile. Like, it is an interesting. I gotta say, like, it's nice how lightly she dusts through the book. You just sort of see a few entries at the beginning of chapters, saying certain kinds of things. But like, she dusts this idea that, like, it's not that we worship change. We're not destroyed by change. We work with change. We live in a time of change, and so guess what? We adopt the strategies that are least conservative, in a sense. We don't conserve what we used to do in the past. We get used to surfing on the changes that we see right now, right? And that's kind of awesome and interesting, and like,
it's very
important.
pragmatic. It's very pragmatic. Like, it's workable. Here's a quote. It's to get along with God, consider the consequences of your behavior. Right? Or, all these things they're words to live by in a post-apocalyptic world. Taking care of people can be a God cure for nightmares, things that can make you feel better in these types of terrible situations. But you're right. The sprinkling throughout the book was really kind of neat. It was a really neat approach.
Yeah, it carried me through. And I think we have to talk about Nora Jemison's book. Like, John Scalzi just mentioned her in our last episode. She comes up in every time we talk to somebody we've read her books. It has to be said that the Broken Earth trilogy is definitely a tribute to this series, right? Like, it is a journey, post-apocalyptic, after some giant event where a mother and child and people are moving forward, against the desperation of other people to find somewhere to be in the Broken Earth. They're ultimately, to be saved, you have to settle in community with people and put up the walls and that's exactly, it's the same story, right? And so it has to be acknowledged that Octavia Butler wrote the story. I think that, and Nora Jemison, sort of tributed in the Broken Earth. It's the same, too much almost, right? And there's all these amazing parallels, right? Like in the Broken Earth trilogy, right? There's these people who are able to tap into and work with the energies of the earth, right? And they are this sort of like slave underclass because of their superpower. And it's really interesting, right? In Parable of the Sower, there is an underclass. It's slightly different. It's like significantly different, but creepy. There is an underclass of people who are super empaths that feel other people's pain, and so therefore make the best sorts of slaves. They're bred to be slaves if they have empathy, that they feel directly of other people's pain, because then they're surrounded by pain. It is such a grim view and vision of this underclass in Octavia Butler's books, right? That they're the empaths. They're bred to be the best slaves. That's so.
Yeah, that's a grim. And these the Parable of the Sower kind of got a resurgent interest in it after the pandemic hit. People started coming back to that book, and it kind of did the rounds again. And I think because we saw a lot of, we have a crisis, and you saw people rise to that crisis and form community, and if anyone's guessing, I'm saying, like got their shots and wore their masks and acted like grown-ups. And you had those people who just weren't up to the challenge and sort of collapsed and became anti-vaxxers, and we lost good people that way. These are the sort of the other casualties of the pandemic. Weren't just the ones who got sick and died in an ICU or lost their jobs or had to leave the workforce for a while, and it was the people who succumbed to conspiracy and total lack of character, if I can be frank. And so you see these people represented. You see all the different types of people that I think we saw in the pandemic. You see in a book like this, and I think maybe that's perhaps why people came back to it, because we hit a crisis. We were forced to change, and some people could, and then some people couldn't, right? And so that's the other sort of piece of this. I think why it came to the fore, why it sort of came to the surface for us, and became a kind of meaningful read at this point in time. So I decided we needed to have a little fun for our next book. Keep it a little lighter, I think. And so we are going to read The Last Watch by J.S. Dews.
What? I know nothing about this.
It's an epic tale of survival at the end of the universe. It is hailed as being The Expanse meets the Game of Thrones.
Ooh,
so I thought that's a big thing to say. So let's find out.
It's got a solid 4.0 on Goodreads.
Yeah,
4.00 right at the.
That's right. I like whatever. Okay, so it takes place at the Divide. It's the edge of the universe.
The Divide. Yeah.
It's now collapsing and taking everyone and everything with it. The only ones who can stop it are the Sentinels, the recruits, exiles, and court-martialed dregs of the military. So we've got a ragtag group of people on a big ship at the edge of the universe who are going to save it. So I thought, why not? Let's do this. And if it totally stinks, then we can take it apart. We are the people to do it. We are well equipped to take this down, or to laud it if it so deserves. To be hailed as the next Expanse and GOT. Sorry, but we're big fans of the Expanse here as our listeners now. So
and GOT.
If you're going to make that kind of claim, then we will.
So wait, to be clear, have you read this book, or you're just going out on a limb here?
I'm just going on a limb. I just did a Google, just random roll the dice. I just put top sci-fi books. I Googled literally top sci-fi books 2022. And this came up. I was like, let's do it.
All right.
And it's the first in a series.
These things.
Yeah, it's called The Divide #1. So first in the series, I like that. It sets us up for something else in the future when it comes out, and it's a new series too, which I love.
Yeah, I think it's just showed up last 2021 or 2022, just like very recent. I even stacked it so like the two of you would be all over it. So the questions are the theme for this week is Elon Musk.
Oh, okay.
So and the prize, I don't know if you remember the arcade game, maybe it was Atari Centipede from the 80s.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, I was able to find this sort of like little video game console of Centipede.
Ooh. It looks like a little arcade, but miniaturized, with two buttons and maybe a little joystick in the middle. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Mm-hmm. So it's got classic arcade gameplay. Destroy the centipede as it moves through the mushroom field. Anyways, one of you two will be the lucky winners.
Marty, you're going down.
I want that. That is my thing. I've been training for that my whole life.
Okay, well, let's see which of you knows the most about Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll start. Where was Elon Musk born?
South Africa.
That was super close.
Oh, I got that. I mean, I gotta say, you gotta stand up for myself.
That's where Zoom lag would have come into play there, because I think our listeners will be the ones who will make that decision.
All right.
Because
it's up to you. Okay, we will keep the score agnostic.
Well, okay. Well, we'll see. Well, we gotta. You know what? We can. You know what? We'll call that a draw. Just to be.
Sure.
And because I got plenty of questions here. So just in case. All right. Yeah. What is Elon Musk's Canadian connection, family connection?
He went to Queen's University, didn't he?
What is his Canadian family connection?
Oh, his mom's from Canada.
Yes. His mother's name.
I have to say, I guessed on that.
Nice work. Ah,
That centipede game is mine.
you were on a roll. It was working for you. You shouldn't have said that.
Mae Musk is his mom. She was a model and dietitian from Regina.
Wow. A model and dietitian from Regina.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. Wow.
I didn't know that either. That's crazy.
Okay.
Now, he dropped out of Stanford after just 2 days to do what?
Start a business.
Yes.
Oh,
Hey.
Now, do you know what that business
was it
was
PayPal?
called?
Was it PayPal?
Was it PayPal?
No, it was Zip2 Corporation.
Oh,
Was that before PayPal?
Yes.
Or after?
must have been.
Yeah.
And it developed and marketed an internet city guide for the newspaper publishing industry.
Mm.
In what year? What were we talking about there?
We are talking like, would have been 99, I guess,
Oh,
98. In the year 2000, the company X.com that Musk co-founded merged with Confinity, which had a money transfer service called what?
PayPal?
PayPal.
Yes, PayPal.
Who said that first?
I just went, I don't know.
That was Kevin.
Oh, it was me. Okay.
Oh.
I just heard Kevin go, PayPal, and then PayPal.
Robbed.
All right. With 100 million US of his early fortune, Musk founded what in May of 2002?
SpaceX.
SpaceX.
Booyah.
Booyah. Nice
All
work.
right.
You deserve that.
Its first spacecraft was called.
A rocket?
No, what was the
Falcon.
name of the rocket?
It wasn't the
Not
Falcon.
No,
Pre-Falcon.
Jeff.
not Jeff.
Okay.
I don't
Elon.
know.
No,
Not Elon.
Eagle. I don't know.
No, we give up. It was
Pigeon.
Rocket.
Dragon.
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 Oh, I
I
thought
thought
that was the
Dragon
name
came
of the
later.
order, the engines or the.
Right, that's true.
Okay.
Dragon did have.
All right. And then after 7 years, SpaceX designed the family of what?
Falcons.
Yes.
Oh,
The
Yeah.
Falcon launch vehicles and the Dragon multi-purpose spacecraft.
right. That's the crew one, right? The Dragon. I think maybe.
Mhm. So even if you had on the controversial ones had tied, Kevin would still be one question ahead.
Oh,
I think that's fair. I think Kevin is fairly and objectively ahead on this.
All right, and the proud
Well,
owner of a Centipede video game.
Oh yeah,
Ooh,
that's what I'm
man.
talking about.
All right.
I'm telling you, Sam, having these gifts really makes this trivia that much more compelling. Thank you,
That's-
Sam. That was a good one. I like that. I like that.
That was
you
fun. That was
can't, you
actually
can't,
challenging and interesting. Yeah.
you can't think about sci-fi without thinking about Elon Musk these days for some reason.
We cover them a lot, eh?
Yeah, we really do. Yeah, it's true. Well, thanks, guys. This is good. That was excellent. Yeah.
Perfect.
Thank you, Marty, Kevin, and Sam. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. Please, if you listen to the show, rate us or let us know what you think. Wherever you listen to podcasts, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.